Note-taking is an important skill in and out of school. It can make the difference between passing and failing a test, excelling at a job, or even enjoying a complicated movie. And most of us don't do it well. Welcome to Wellcast. We took a viewer suggestion for this week's episode, the art of note-taking. We're going to give you a 3-step method for taking notes that will actually help you learn. Numerous studies over the years have proven what's already pretty obvious. People who take notes remember the material better than those who don't. But how much better? A 1970 study by developmental psychologist Michael Howe found that students were 7 times more likely to remember facts 1 week after hearing them if they took notes. But here's the thing. Most people don't know how to take notes.
Hello, my name is DJ Jellison. I'm a teaching candidate here at California University of Pennsylvania in the Master's Arts of Teaching program. I also am a graduate assistant in the Office of Student Success. So what I want to do is I want to go a little bit further with this note-taking theme. And what I want to share with you is my own teaching philosophy that I've come up with about note-taking. But it goes further than just note-taking. I want to break down the role of teaching and the role of learning and give it a theme. And the theme that I want to give it is storytelling. So I want you to think about when you're in a class and when you're listening to your teacher lecture or you're listening to whatever the lesson that is unfolding, I want you to think of it as a story that is being told to you. Okay? And it's easier if we break down the lesson into a story, because a story is something that we all are familiar with. We've all heard stories in the past. We've all told stories of our own. So when we're in the classroom, let's break it down. Okay? Let's break it down. Let's take a look at that. So like I said, storytelling is something that we're all familiar with because we've all been there. Storytelling is something that at an early age we hear. We hear our parents tell stories. We hear our grandparents tell stories. And then later on in life, we tell stories of our own. So think about it. Think about some stories right now. Maybe you were at a fire ring when you were a kid and you heard a story. Or maybe your friend called you one weekend and told you a really funny story. We all can hear it. You know, we've read stories, we've watched videos, we've watched television shows. All of those are stories. And that's how we view them. We view movies as a story. We view theatrical performances as a story. And I think we also need to view teaching and learning as a story as well. So when we look at the traditional method of school, we look at it as, well, there's a lesson, and there's usually a lecture that goes involved with that lesson. So your teacher or your professor is telling you a lecture. They're speaking at you. Okay? Now the problem is that we don't know how to combine lecturing, note-taking, and then the test. We don't understand how these things relate to each other. So what happens is that the teacher is up there and they're lecturing, and then that is the role of the student then is to listen and to take notes. But remember, we don't know how to take notes. Nobody's ever told us how to take notes. Nobody's ever told us what notes to take. They just say, you're going to need to take notes because you need to know this information. Thank you, right? So we fail to do the note-taking because we just don't know how to do it. Nobody's broken it down for us. And then when the test comes along, we don't do well on the test because, well, we didn't take good notes. We didn't study well because we have trouble taking notes. We don't understand this process. So what I want to do is I want to connect these two. I want to connect storytelling with the traditional method of teaching and learning. So what I want to do is I want to break down this column. I want to come over and I want to talk about this. Okay? So instead of lecturing, I want you to think of it as your professor or your teacher is really telling you a story. Okay? So think about the stories that we've heard in our own lives. You sit at a fire ring, your buddy calls you. Somebody along your lifespan has told you numerous stories. You've heard numerous stories. Okay? So when we hear a story, we listen to that story. And when we listen to that story, we process the information. What is being told and what's important? What are the important things that I need to know about the story? And then later on in life, we've probably retold that story. So let's transition it back into the classroom. A lecture is just like hearing a story. Your teacher is telling you a story. regardless of the subject, biology, physics, history, Spanish, whatever it is, think of the lesson as a story. That is what the lecture is. It is a story. So what do you do when you listen to a story? You listen to it. You comprehend what they're saying. And that's what you do with note-taking. Note-taking is listening to the story and comprehending with the information that's being told. Later on in life, you're going to retell that story someday. And that's exactly what the test is. The test is just, how am I going to regurgitate the story? How do I retell the story? So, the next time that you find yourself in a classroom, instead of thinking, oh, this is boring, I don't understand this lecture, I don't know how to take notes, think of it this way. What is the story that's being told today? Listen to what that story is, and then break down the information in a way that you can retell that story later in life. Because that is exactly what the test is. It's just a retelling of the story. All right, so let's move on with this well-cast video.
From a very young age that when a teacher starts delivering a load of information, for example, Shakespeare described Romeo and Juliet's love as star-crossed, that we should start writing down as much as what they're saying as possible. Phew! Well, this is an incredibly inefficient way to take notes. The average student takes notes at a rate of 1/3 of a word per second. The average teacher speaks about 2 to 3 words per second. Bottom line, if you're trying to copy down everything your teacher is saying while he drones on about Shakespeare, you're going to fall seriously behind. You're not actually learning anything. You're simply acting as a human audio recorder. A recorder, by the way, that only picks up 1 out of every 10 words. And you're saving the learning for later, when you'll have an even less complete lesson plan to look over. Note-taking should actually act as a form of learning. Something that helps you work your way through the lesson as the teacher is giving it, so that when you leave the classroom, you already understand the concepts. So how do you do that? We have a 3-step method for taking the kind of notes that force you to learn the material inside the classroom and not out. Pause and print this sheet and put it in your binder, ready for your next class. Finished? Okay, let's go. Step 1, don't write down facts. Write down conclusions. Don't worry about capturing every single thing your teacher is saying. Spend more time listening and trying to understand the lecture. When you do start writing, format your notes as a series of questions posed by the teacher's lecture and fill in your own answers. For example, question: what is the central theme in Romeo and Juliet? Conclusion: more than being a tragic love story, Romeo and Juliet is about the consequences of deeply held grudges. This way, you're recording the importance of what the teacher is saying and not just raw facts. When you do need to include data, add only the most important points under each question. This is the evidence for each question.
All right, guys, I want to stop right there because I really like what the Wellcast video is saying about note-taking, but I kind of want to do a little bit more feedback on that. All right, so let's go up here and let's talk about it. All right, so what happens is that we're in the classroom and we get so anxious about this whole note-taking thing because we're supposed to take notes. Everybody tells us to take notes, but what do we take notes on? I don't know what to take notes on. The teacher is talking so fast. There's so many things that's written on the board. I have these slideshows. So what students do is they fall into this misconception that they have to write everything down. But that becomes a problem. When we try to write everything down, what happens is that we're not really comprehending anything. We're not comprehending anything because we're not listening enough, because we're too busy writing, and then we miss information and we never understand it, so that the way that we write it, it doesn't make sense. And then when we go back to review our notes for the test, we're trying to read all this stuff, and we have no idea what we wrote. We have no idea what we wrote. We can't understand it, it doesn't work for us, the information is not accurately written down, and it doesn't do anything for us. So, just like the video says, we don't want you to write down everything that is being said. We don't want you to write down everything that's on the chalkboard or everything that's on the slideshow. Don't do that because it won't work. It won't work. You see, instead of trying to write down everything that you hear, I want you to write down everything that you're learning. Okay? So everything that you're learning. When you think about something, or if you hear something in the classroom and you say, you know what? I never heard that before. That's pretty interesting. That's when you start to write that stuff down. Or if you hear something and you're like, you know what? That sounds important. I should probably write that down. You write that down. And then the big one of them all is, that sounds like it could be a test question. Write that down, guys. Because that's the kind of stuff that we need. Okay? That's the kind of stuff that we need. I want you to write down what you're learning. A lot of people, they come to me and they say, you know what, my problem with test taking is that I get into the classroom and I go to take the test and I don't remember anything. And I always tell them, well, there's a problem with that. And the problem is that in education, we're not out to remember things. It's not about memory. What it is about, it's about learning. We should be learning things and understanding things. So when you're in the classroom, write down the things that you are learning, not the things that you're remembering. Because that makes note-taking so much easier. But I know, we're not talking just about note-taking. We need to get back to this whole idea about storytelling. Okay, so how does this all relate to storytelling? Well, earlier in the template, when I broke down the traditional method, I said that note-taking takes the place of listening. Okay, listening to the story. So let's look at it this way. Your friend calls you up and you guys are talking, okay, and your friend tells you a story and they tell you about the time, oh, you know, I showed up late to work, my manager was yelling at me, I started to cry, I didn't want the customer to see me cry, so I turned and I accidentally walked into a customer. We hit each other right in the face and I broke my nose. I started bleeding. My manager had to take me to the hospital. It was really awkward and it was super embarrassing. Okay, you listen to that story. And then a couple months later, you're at a fire ring and everybody around you is telling embarrassing stories. And then you think to yourself, oh my gosh, that reminds me of a story. I heard a story just like this. And then you start to tell your friend's story. Okay? But you do it in a certain way. You see, you do not tell that story the exact same way that your friend told you. You don't do that. You put your own spin on it. You're not a robot trying to retell exactly word for word what your friend told you. That's not what it's about. You're telling the same story, but you're putting your own spin on it. And you're telling the things that matter. Okay? And that's how note-taking should be. Note-taking should be writing down the things that matter. So when you're in a classroom, you need to think of it this way. Not everything in the classroom that's being said, it doesn't all matter. There are certain points in the classroom that matter. There are certain ideas that the teacher is saying that matter. Just like in a story, if you're going to retell a story, you don't have everything in that story that needs to be retold. Only the key points need to be retold. So when you're listening to the story in your classroom, I need you to think of this. Number one, what is the story that's being told? Number two, what are the key points that I need to know to be able to retell that story later? And those are the types of things that you write down in your notes. What are the key points? You gotta find them. All right, let's get back to the video.
Step 2. Use colored pens. Yeah, that's right. This will help you remember your notes visually. Also, if you establish a set template for your notes, you'll be able to take them more efficiently. Write questions in red and definitions in blue, conclusions in green?
Yeah, so basically what the lady in the video is trying to say is categorize it your own personal way. Write your notes in a way that you can read them later and understand. It's not good when you're writing down notes and then later you're reading them to study and you're like, I have no idea what I just wrote. No idea. So what you want to do is you want to organize it in a way that you understand it. Put your own little personal thing and write down the things that you're hearing. Write them in your own words. Don't write down what the professor's saying, because sometimes the professor will say something and you don't understand what he's saying. but you learn it and you say, oh, okay, I understand that. You write it in a way that you understand it so that later, a couple days down the road, when you're reading your notes, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Also, organize it the way that you want to organize it. This is just an example that I did. I got some arrows right here. It's just the way that I do it. Organize it the way that you want. She's telling you to do it color-coded. If you want to do it that way, do it that way. You don't have to do it that way. Just make sure that you understand what your notes are so that you can retell the story later. Does that make sense? All right, let's get back.
Step 3, review your notes. Don't relearn them. Spend at least 10 minutes organizing your notes after class. If you want to test your comprehension, try teaching the material to a classmate. This will be a great marker to see if you've actually learned anything. Note-taking is a valuable life skill that doesn't lose its utility when you graduate. Find ways to integrate note-taking in your daily life. You'll soon find yourself in the exclusive and creative group of people who bring out their moleskins at lectures, movies, and TED Talks.
All right, so let's do a little recap of our own. Now remember, I broke it down in a way that we can all relate to, and that relation is the storytelling theme. And remember, when we're storytelling, we're doing a few things. Okay, so instead of the teacher lecturing, remember, they're just telling you a story. And your job is to take some notes, right? Well, when you're note-taking, what I really want you to be doing is listening. I want you to listen to what the teacher is saying, and I want you to be able to write down what the key points are in the video. Okay, so that's going to be what your note-taking is. Okay, so what's the story being told? The lecture, the story. What are the key points? What do I need to know? I need to comprehend this. I need to listen and comprehend. That's what your note-taking is. And then remember, we're all going to have to take a test, and all the test is I need you to be able to retell the story. Do you understand the information enough that you can retell that story? Now, the video gets into how you can review with friends, tell your notes to friends. And the best way to understand something, the best way to understand a story is to just keep retelling it, okay? The more you retell a story, the better that story becomes to you, the more you understand that story, okay? And that's what it all comes down to. So just remember, when you're in a classroom, regardless of what the subject is, there is an underlying story that is being told. You just got to figure out, what is that story? What are the important things about that story? And how am I going to be able to retell that story later? That is my philosophy. That is what note-taking is about. That's what education's about. Being a learner is listening, and a teacher is telling. And that's what it's about. And it's something that we can all relate to. So that is my philosophy. That is the way that I look at it. That's the way that I break down learning and teaching. And that's the way I break down note-taking. So I really hope that this works. It's something that has worked tremendously in my own life, and it's also been something that my students have shared with me, and they come back to me and they say, you know what, this has really worked for me. I'm really, really glad that you shared this with me. So this is my teaching philosophy of storytelling and note-taking.
Okay.
Thank
Did
you.
these tips help? Let us know. Or if you have a wellness topic that you'd like to see covered, shoot us an email. We'd love to see your notes. Oh man. Tweet us at WatchWellcast, email us at watchwellcast@gmail.com, or leave a comment down below. We'll see you next time.